Well, the day has finally come when we can enjoy a live-action Star Wars television show. Sure, we had to add another monthly streaming service to our collection, but let's be real. Disney's owned our souls since we were kids, so it's not that surprising. The Mandalorian was the perfect blend of blasters, action, and comedic moments that activated all our nostalgia sensors for the old movies. But what about that ending? Let's break down the episode and talk about what's going on with the Mando's target. Warning, spoilers are ahead. The first episode of The Mandalorian started out strong, and there were tons of Easter eggs and callbacks to previous entries in the Star Wars universe. But we know what you want to hear about the most, and we're not going to keep you waiting. We all want to talk about the fact that they mentioned everyone's favorite holiday, Life Day. Now, Life Day is a time-honored Wookiee holiday and has an important part in the universally beloved Star Wars holiday special. What? That's not what you wanted to hear about? Oh, right, yeah, the ending. Yeah, what a cliffhanger, huh? The eponymous Mandalorian accepts a strange, mysterious, and immensely profitable bounty tip from Greef Carga, the leader of a bounty hunter guild. He's stingy with the info, and all our hero knows going into this is that his target is 50 years old. Despite the fact that the Mandalorian is clearly familiar with many different alien species, he's still stunned when he realizes the target is a teeny little baby Yoda. I know that Yoda is the name of a character and not a species, but let's not forget that this show takes place 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, which means Master Yoda is long gone at this point. Although, if members of his species are still infants after 50 years, it makes sense that Yoda was able to live to be over 900 years old, even though Jedi are notoriously long-lived. Well, usually. There is a lot of Star Wars lore out there, to put it lightly, but surprisingly, we know very little about Yoda's species. He's a very popular character, but nobody knows the true name of his species or even what planet they originated from. So go ahead and add that to the list of information that you didn't know. And why don't we know? Well, you can add that to the list of things to blame George Lucas for. Before the release of The Phantom Menace, Lucasfilm was reluctant to allow any entry in the franchise to expand on Yoda's origins. They even vetoed a run of trading cards that would have featured characters like Yoda. So why are people after this ridiculously adorable green baby? And why were so many willing to risk their lives to protect it? There might be some hints on the Star Wars timeline. I mentioned that this show takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, and we learned that this baby's about 50 years old. If that's true, it was born at about 41 BBY, which was the same year Anakin Skywalker was born. Even though Anakin eventually used the Force for evil, there's no doubt that he was adept at using it and learned quickly. It's often been thought that beings like Yoda may be predisposed to becoming powerful Jedi. Let's not forget that Master Yoda himself was one of the most powerful Jedi in the history of the Order, so credit where credit's due. And there's also Yaddle from The Phantom Menace, who also sat on the council, even if we never really learned much about her. If eventually evil Anakin was born in 41 BBY, is it possible an eventually benevolent child was born the same year to balance him out? Is that why the remainder of the Empire is so intent on finding the kid? Let's not forget that they asked the Mandalorian to bring it back alive if at all possible. It losing its life would mean forfeiting half the bounty, and that's a less than ideal career move. The scientist seemed way too eager to get his hands on that baby, so it seems safe to assume he was hoping to do some kind of experiments on it. It's also quite telling that the remnants of the Empire would rather have the baby pass away than let it continue living outside of its control. Perhaps they hope this child could be brought up to use the Force under their guidance and lead the Empire back to its former glory. But what does this mean for Pedro Pascal's Mandalorian? Earlier in the show, there was a flashback to a scene we saw in the trailer which featured a young child in the heat of a serious battle. It seems like this kid is indeed a young Mandalorian, and there are some B-2 super battle droids and an HMP droid gunship which help us approximate the time to 30 years prior to the first episode. Mando made it pretty clear from the get-go that he ain't a big fan of droids. He'd rather pay more for a beaten-up speeder piloted by a flesh-and-bones being than take a ride from a shiny new droid. And of course, just when he seemed to warm up to IG-11, a bounty-hunting droid voiced by Taika Waititi, things went south. When the droid threatened to terminate the baby, the Mandalorian took him down. Was this because of the previous flashback to his own traumatic childhood, or does the child's species mean something to him? And is it possible that this little itty-bitty green guy's related to Yoda in some way? Hey, The Mandalorian includes multiple references to the Star Wars Holiday Special, which includes a look at Chewbacca's family. The dating pool, or should we say the swamp in Dagobah, was probably pretty limited, but it could have happened. Who knows, maybe Yoda liked to hang out on Dagobah before going into isolation. Maybe it's his kid or a distant relative. Or maybe we just miss Master Yoda, and they just happen to belong to the same species. After all, we don't assume all of the human creatures in Star Wars are related. Or maybe we should start doing that. In the movies, Anakin's mother claims to have been party to an immaculate conception. One day, she just woke up pregnant with a little Skywalker, and that was that. Sounded crazy to, well, pretty much everybody, but Qui-Gon Jinn believed the Force itself impregnated Anakin's mother, which is really creepy if you think about it for more than a second, so let's move on. Anyway, this made Anakin the chosen one, and we all know how that ended. Way down on the low ground, where the lava lives. But according to the Darth Vader series, it was the result of Emperor Palpatine meddling in Shmi Skywalker's womb, which also sounds really gross. So Palpatine was kind of his father in that he was responsible for Shmi's pregnancy. It's possible that Baby Yoda was created through a similar process, either during another Sith experiment or by someone trying to counteract that one with a more light side-centric immaculate conception. Either way, it puts a lot of pressure on this little 50-year-old bundle of joy. Clearly, the Mandalorian is a bounty hunter, and an excellent one at that. In fact, his kind's reputation seems to precede him throughout the episode. The Mandalorians are notoriously adept fighters, and he seems to be no exception, especially when he starts out the episode by taking out 90% of the bar's patrons. Man, what a great scene. Just for good measure, he takes out a giant alien seal creature before flying away with his bounty in hand. When said bounty decides to look for a way out of his ship, he discovers that he's not the Mando's only passenger, and there are others frozen in carbonite, which has apparently become the Star Wars universe's preferred scallywag storage system. The timeline of the Mandalorian becomes more clear when he encounters Greef Carga, played by Carl Weathers, who tries to pay in Imperial credits. When the Mandalorian meets with the client, he ends up in a standoff against several stormtroopers, and even though he's outnumbered, he seems pretty happy with those odds. The Mandalorian agrees to bring back the target, even though this whole deal is done off the books and in pretty much the shadiest way possible. The client gives him a piece of Beskar steel, a substance also known as Mandalorian iron. Mando takes the piece to the armorer, played by Emily Swallow, who makes him a pauldron and reveals two important bits of information. The first was that this was taken from the Mandalorians during a purge, and the second is that it will be used to create armor for foundlings. This is likely a reference to the Great Purge, which wasn't really that great. It was the elimination of the Jedi Order at the hands of good old Palpatine. This set off a chain of events that echoed throughout the galaxy and had disastrous consequences for many. It certainly seems like the Mandalorians are trying to rebuild, and the main character is doing his best to assist. Apparently, sweet little baby Yoda is being kept on a desert planet in a place best accessed via blurg. Except that a few of them attack the Mandalorian on sight. It's actually kind of reminiscent of the Tusken Raider attack on Luke Skywalker from way back in A New Hope. A helpful Ugnaught named Kuiil, played by Nick Nolte, suggests Mando remove his helmet to make the ride easier, but he wordlessly refuses. Mandalorians and their helmets, huh? But eventually, he's able to make nice and ride the blurg. Kuiil points out that there was a time when Mandalorians rode creatures called mythosaurs. When Mando arrives, he realizes that an IG droid was also contracted for this bounty. See what happens when you try to do stuff off the record? It becomes a whole thing instead of a streamlined process. The Mandalorian is able to use IG-11 to his advantage, and is able to stop him from activating his self-destruct sequence at the drop of a hat. Seriously, this droid does not have the best survival instincts. Thankfully, they manage to acquire a blaster cannon and take out their attackers before turning it on the heavy door standing between them and their target. Pedro Pascal's character has been described as an anti-hero type so far. He's a fantastic fighter who isn't an all-out bad guy, but has a questionable moral character. To be fair, slaughtering infants is pretty far outside the range of morally questionable, whether you're in a galaxy far, far away or in this one. Sure, he annihilated IG-11, but he clearly didn't do so just because he didn't want to split the bounty or because of his established distaste for droids. It'll definitely be interesting to learn more about his personality, and to see how it develops over the course of the show. Who am I kidding? I just want to see more of that little baby Yoda and learn all of his adorable secrets. What do you think about the cliffhanger at the end of The Mandalorian? Tell us about your predictions for the next episode in the comment section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more new videos from CBR. And hey, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.